It's very hard to get an interview out of Dr. Y.V. Reddy in India, and so the best place to catch him is at the IMF summit here in Bali. Let's talk to him about the world that we are living in, global growth forecasts that have been lowered, India's own problems with the currency, and of course India's banking system. Thank you very much for being with us. And like I said earlier, it's difficult to get a word out of you in India, so it's only fair that I ask you stuff in Bali. I first want to begin talking to you about the globe at large, sir. The IMF yesterday lowered the global growth forecast on account of global trade tensions that are rising. Is it safe to say that we've moved away from the rhetoric and this is real trade wars that are looming large on the world? And what would the repercussions of this not just be on the developed world but also on emerging markets like India?
I think there are two, three things in that question.
Sure.
First question is, what does the trade war mean? I believe trade war is the beginning of a bigger tension. Trade war is really an issue of threat to multilateralism. As of now, there is an impression that USA represents the power, the existing superpower, and China is fighting the battle of multilateralism. Is that true? Or is that it's fighting for the status of supremacy in the global power equations? So if it is the later, then this will not end by simple bilateral negotiation. So I think the real issue is it something that's likely to be resolved through negotiations? That's a question mark. I'm not sure.
So not likely to be resolved through negotiations, but given the fact that now, multilateral forums like IMF feel that global growth is going to suffer on account of that, how soon before this starts feeding into the growth figures and growth numbers that we're seeing in the United States? And increasingly there's a protectionist stance that the world is seeing, and may I dare say, India seems to be following that cue as well.
See, there are two different things again, quote unquote, the impact or implications for protectionism. For instance, in the case of India, let's take USA vis-a-vis China and USA vis-a-vis India. USA vis-a-vis China, if USA is taking action, in a way it could hurt China, but the surplus will come down. And there, whereas in the case of India, we are already a deficit country. In a current account deficit, if it hurts us, then it adds to global imbalance.
That's right. Yes.
So I think that's a different ballgame altogether. But as far as the global growth prospects are concerned, actually it's not only just the trade wars that is impacting. The tightening of US monetary policy, the high oil prices, and third is the type of balance sheet exposures. Advanced economies, as you know, the monetary policies has been too loose. You have to change that direction.
Yes.
In the emerging market economies, some of their balance sheets are over leveraged. Some of the corporates have. But all emerging markets are not in the same basket. Some are strong in fiscal, some are weak in fiscal. For instance, let us take India. In a way, the financial sector problem, which is essentially a public sector banking, should be added to the problem of fiscal.
That's right, yes.
Whereas in the case of China also, I think some of their corporates, they are virtually government owned. So I would say that emerging markets by and large have overextended themselves to some extent, and to some extent they have to face the consequences of tightening in advanced economies.
Dr. Reddy, I think it's only fair that I talk to you about India from a macro and a micro point of view. About 3 years back, it looked like our macros were a little shaky. Then we thought our macros were getting stable. Now suddenly there are these fresh fault lines that we are seeing, whether it's fiscal slippage concerns, whether it's CAD, whether it's the weak rupee. There are all these new fault lines that are coming up. How worried are you as far as India is concerned from both a macro and a micro point of view?
Let me do the macro part of it. You see, macro question is, I believe you are referring basically to external sector.
Sure, yes.
In terms of external sector balance, India has what is known as the structural current account deficit, and then there's impact of shocks on the current account deficit. I think we have been generally, and we continue to be fairly strong in able to manage the structural current account deficit. We get into problems whenever there are shocks. And currently, recently, generally perhaps, there are two sources of shock, the oil price and the capital flows.
That's right, yes.
When both the shocks happen, then the management becomes necessary to get over the shocks. I think what has happened this time is that when we had a good run with ample liquidity, and with the oil prices low, I think we took it for granted and not strengthened things which we should have strengthened. If there
What
is a-
would you have liked to be strengthened then?
I would have done, not I would have done, perhaps that provided a cushion for fiscal consolidation, perhaps, and perhaps in terms of external sector management, capital account, if some correction in the value was required, if it was anticipated, then you should have allowed it a bit rather than not allow it a bit. You see what happens if you are managing my exchange rate, whatever view you take by and large, if it is out, if the central banker feels that it's a bit out of alignment,
Right, right.
then you try to take the initiative to bring it back to alignment before the markets take initiative.
Dr. Reddy, before I go into the initiatives taken and were they the right approach, because are we turning our backs towards liberalization, all of that, I want to specifically talk to you about the rupee. The rupee has been consistently weak. The government and the RBI took some steps. A lot of question being asked is, should the RBI alone have taken those steps and not the government? I'm coming to that in just a bit. But why is it that the rupee's slide is not being able to rein in? Has the market and the currency market lost faith in the government, in the RBI? Is there loss of credibility more than anything else?
There are 2-3 possibilities. One possibility, which perhaps could be in the minds of the Reserve Bank, is that the markets are taking one-way bet generally, and when there is an attack on the rupee, they want the RBI to bail it out. I want to change this mentality. That's a fundamental stand, and I can appreciate if there is a judgment like that. So it could be that reason to be said in favor of, and because the delicate nature, there may not be adequate communication.
True.
Second, traditionally, exchange rate regime was rather, let me put it this way, it would have ended here, but there is another complication that has come. Traditionally, exchange rate regime is determined by the government. Exchange rate management of the managed float is done by RBI. This time we are seeing that the government is entering into the picture. So in a way, therefore, exchange rate management appears to be dual responsibility, or it is the government is trying to fill in the space that the RBI is vacating. So that's a bit confusing.
But isn't that ironic and isn't that unfortunate? Because the mandate of the RBI really was both price stability as well as currency and forex management in that sense. Has RBI ceded space, or has government stepped onto RBI's toes?
See, there are two things. Once this amendment, as the governor rightly pointed out, once the amendment has taken place, though technically it is flexible inflation targeting, you could give way to other objectives. The RBI will be well justified if they tilt in favor of price stability more than external sector. But my personal view is that for India, from 1957 till for about 40 years, the biggest problem was external sector balance. So by and large, since 1990s, the Reserve Bank has been giving a lot of weight to the external sector balance.
Would you, as RBI governor, have gone and made ahead a policy that was just looking at inflation, because there are external sector vulnerabilities as well?
But as I said, it's possible that the RBI took a deliberate view
To not
that
do it.
to not to do it this time. So I cannot say that. But I think by and large there is a difference between the legal provision now and the legal provision then. Legal provision then at that point of time was relative weights to growth, stability were to be decided by the governor depending on the context. After the amendment, the RBI is bound to give priority to price stability.
It's an interesting thing that you say that this is a dual role being performed by the government and the RBI. Cynics will turn around and say the markets and the currency markets don't want to listen to either. But if I may just talk to you largely about the steps that have been taken, whether it is import duties that have been hiked. Yes, we are WTO reliant, but the signal that has been sent, or the 5-point policy prescription that was made that would have impacted very few imports. Is there a larger sense that in a world that's increasingly insular, India seems to be joining the chorus as well? Do we risk being seen as turning our backs on economic liberalization that has served us well?
No, there are two things. One, if these are measures which are announced, as very often we used to do, to be in the current context, then I won't say it's a reversal, but it is a temporary regime. My impression is, whether fully, perhaps not fully stated, but these are measures for, like sometimes gold imports.
That's right.
We tighten.
Yes.
Other imports have tightened. So if it is transient, it's fine. But I don't think it will be necessary or a great advantage for India to join the chorus of reversal of the approach that's external sector management. But I think where we have to be more active is the capital account management. What are the type of flows? If, for instance, if I'm not mistaken, the last couple of years, we are getting more debt flows from the FIIs and more so government paper. Perhaps that indicated a bit of loss of appetite to take risk in India.
That's right.
So these are the type of signals. See, in current account deficit, whatever measures you take, except a few of them, they have a deferred effect nowadays. So, so you have to be a lot more concentrating on capital account for managing the exchange.
Fair point, and the FPI outflows that we are seeing, I think perhaps also tell another picture. But sir, I know it's going to be foolhardy to predict, but how much more pain do you believe there still is in the making as far as the Indian currency is concerned?
My sense is, as of now, definitely it is not out of alignment. So there should be much of a downside risk. If at all, there could have been overcorrection. So in my view, whatever correction was necessary has already taken place, in my view, on a judgmental basis. So I would see very little downside unless there is serious mucking up of some policy or communications.
We are talking in Bali, and the IMF yesterday did red flag rising crude oil prices as one concern as far as India's fiscal management is concerned. Moody's also put out a report that we will not be able to meet 3.3%. Are you worried about fiscal slippage, especially given that we are less than a year away from general elections?
See, yes, if you see of the total revenue, if I'm not mistaken, oil imports account for about 20% of the indirect tax revenues. Yes. So, and therefore, definitely, there is a huge link between fiscal and oil price. Oil price has two types of impact: balance of payments and the fiscal.
That's right.
And both tend to go adverse. So therefore, I think there is a bit of a fiscal stress angle to it.
Dr. Reddy, I can't not ask you banking, and you rightly said in a statement just a while back that the problem in India is not of banking, it's public sector banking. The way to deal with it is IBC. There are certain legal issues with that. A lot of people have moved court. How confident are you that we'll be able to tide over this NPA crisis? How many more quarters, how much more time before we can decisively say we've been able to tackle with the bad loan menace of India?
See, there are two ways of looking at it. One, in the normal source, if you are the owner of a bank, if you are having less capital, then we simply say, I'll let the owner bring the capital, otherwise I'll restrict the operations. That option is not there now. So essentially, the government, in some ways, has, for whatever the reason, has delayed injection of capital that should have taken place. And it has affected the credit growth, etc. So that is the issue. In some ways, one can say that the problem has been flagged. There is an attempt to tackle the problem, but the solution is not in sight. Whereas normally, when there is a banking is there and there is a problem, what we do is that we flag the problem and we say that we are solving the problem and then focus on the solution. In the last couple of years, I think the emphasis on the problem has been more rather than the end of the tunnel. I think that's what's shaking up the whole system. And as of now, we still don't know, because the way the governance continues the way it has been going on, then you'll have another round of recapitalization.
Fair point. I want to speak to you about a specific case, IL&FS. The government had to supersede the IL&FS board. As a former central banker, people have debated, is this a liquidity issue or is this a solvency issue? It got to a point where IL&FS's board had to be taken over. The government is now trying to fix it with putting a new board in place and all of that, perhaps breaking it up into entities. But the larger question is also of the fact that LIC and SBI, I mean, IL&FS was a systemic important NBFC, but what about LIC and SBI? They were on the boards with very significant stake. They are systemic financial institutions by the RBI.
You are absolutely right. There are two dimensions to it. I think first thing, I have a feeling that the government took the example of Satyam.
That's right.
And trying to fix this as a big one.
Wrong example to compare it with?
I don't know, but definitely it was fairly important. And we don't know whether there was that much of fraud. That we don't know.
True.
But the difference is that many of the projects in which ILFS is involved involves the government, central government and state governments. It involves infrastructure. So there is slightly more than financial stability issue. There is also the physical assets in which the stakeholder. See, whenever there are infrastructure, whenever there is public-private participation, the government bears more risk than the private sector.
That's right, yes.
More than financial risk. So in a way, therefore, both the central and state governments had assumed risk far beyond their financial exposure because of the nature of the entity and the number of... So therefore, the government had a greater stake. And in that sense, maybe it is justified. And whether the liquidity solvency, it has been left vague. Deliberately, perhaps, I don't know. But my hunch is the RBI might have said that it's not simple liquidity. And therefore, in a way, passed on the baby to the government. Now, as far as the RBI is concerned, I think the RBI as a regulator and supervisor should be partly worried about ILFS, but in reality, they should be worried about the large institutions which had the exposure to this institution. That means the risk control mechanisms in large institutions are not adequate.
That's right.
And that should be a source of worry.
And these were bigger institutions, LIC, SBI, HDFC, and all of them had really big stakes. So that's an important. But do you believe RBI should proactively look at risk management at institutions like these?
I believe that, as I said, the first thing that you have to do is large institutions like LIC, SBI, the banks, where they are taking public deposits, their risk control mechanism should be the focus. But they should not result in the intensive regulation and supervision of non-depositing NBFCs.
But I want to ask you a question on NBFCs because the chatter back in Delhi and in Bombay is that there needs to be a review and a relook of regulations for the NBFCs. What shape should that review and regulation take?
I think 11 years back, if I recall, the whole of Bombay and also Delhi didn't want any NBFC that is not taking part to be regulated. Right. So you can't swing from one extreme to another extreme. The way I believe right thing to do is, of course, the public deposit taking NBFC should be treated differently from non-deposit taking. In the case of non-deposit taking, the assumption is that that light regulation. But the moment the larger the NBFC, larger the possible systemic implications, a larger or more intensive regulation should be. So I think in non-depositing NBFCs, you should not have across the board rule. But in fact, again, if you take, there are some NBFCs which are regulated by several regulators. And there again, there is a slight issue. Earlier, unstated stability was in the jurisdiction of RBI, financial stability. Now we are considering Financial Stability and Development Council. So in a way, the government is more in charge of stability.
There's an FSDC. But sir, I know the problem is in the public sector banking space, and experts like you and many others have said this. But the reality also is that India's private banking seems to be going through a crisis of sorts as well, whether it's a controversy at ICICI Bank or Axis or at Yes Bank. What do you think is wrong there? Is there again an issue of a different kind of misgovernance? The fact that, you know, there are these larger than life CEOs who are synonymous with banks, and is there a review required in terms of tenure of bank CEOs and all of that?
I think there are, the first issue is the magnitudes are different, the nature is different.
True.
And basically the price for misgovernance is essentially paid by the shareholder.
True.
Therefore there is not that type of public interest. But as a regulator, the incentives for CEOs is the responsibility. The fit and proper is the responsibility. And these are matters in regard to fit and proper. There is a bit of a subjective element, and the communication is not legalistic to maintain the trust. So I think the governance of RBI should be a matter on which there should be constant interaction between the RBI and larger private sector banks. And therefore, the terms and conditions of the board should be more intensely looked at. It doesn't mean regulated, but it is sort of an advisory.
True.
So it's not, let me put it this way. We have to differentiate between regulatory compliance and regulatory comfort.
And that distinction will have to be made by the RBI, and essentially.
Senior judgment. Senior. For instance, you were just mentioning to me that in the case of somebody, the office felt that it's okay, but the senior management felt it.
In case of Rana Kapoor, the officers down below gave him a clean chit, but at the top level, the RBI rejected his.
Yeah, that happens.
But sir, how do you explain the fact that the RBI has rejected his extension, and then the board of the bank, which has these independent directors and people, ask for an extension for a year? So what does this tell you about the boards of banks like these?
I am a little surprised. I'm a little surprised. I don't know what the situation is, but my philosophy was regulators should be feared, not liked.
Regulators should be feared and not liked, and you always made the distinction between a dove and a hawk as well. A quick last question before I let go of you and let you enjoy your sojourn in Bali. So is that as far as RBI is concerned, there is far less communication that's happening. Do you think the RBI needs to communicate a little more?
You see, there were days, it's the two things normally. RBI communication is what is the institutional policy for communication, and the governor as an individual. Whether it is in India, all over the world, the central banks are governor-centric. They're governor-centric.
Yes.
So therefore, it may be partly reflection of the RBI's philosophy and partly reflection of the incumbent. So I worked with two governors. Rangarajan was quite good at communicating. Jalan used to make others communicate.
It was you always. I don't know who the others was. But on that note, sir, thank you very much for speaking to us. Such a pleasure, sir.